Everybody, James Floyd Kelly here. Welcome to episode 3 of Novel Ideas. I'm with author Erik Wex here, and in this episode we're going to talk to Erik about his writing process. Does that scare you, Erik?
Yeah, a little, but it'll be good.
Well, you know, when we say the writing process, I'm a nonfiction writer, so I have my own methods for when I tackle a book. I tend to write entire chapters in one sitting. I set a goal, I sit down, I say, okay, I've got to get chapter 2 done today, and I write until I get chapter 2 done. But with fiction, it's a little different, or maybe it's not. I don't know. So I'm curious to know, are you writing right now?
I'm not writing a lot right now, which is one of the things that's kind of bothered me. I didn't get much done last week with the holiday, and this week has filled up. So I'm 2 days in, and I am going to, and I'm forced to outline my next novel, because I specifically set up a class at the library where I'm teaching novel outlining, which would make me have to sit down and do my own homework for the class that I'm teaching, and that's the only way I'm getting something outlined or produced is because I've forced myself to do it. So,
you know, whatever works. I sometimes will get on Facebook or tell my friends and family that I'm starting a new book and I plan on getting chapter 1 done today. And just by telling the world I'm going to get chapter 1, it's like peer pressure, you know. It's like, because I know that I've got a few friends that are going to say, "Did you get chapter 1 done?"
Yep.
So there's nothing wrong with, you know, setting yourself up for success. You know, making yourself do a little work, right?
True enough.
Let me ask you this: since you brought it up, you mentioned outlining.
Yeah.
Let's just forget for the moment that you're not writing right now, and let's just assume that you decide you're going to start writing. Is that where you start in your writing process? Do you start with an idea and then take it to an outline form?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big believer in writing before you write. So a book that I think everyone who's considering writing should read is a book by Rachel Aaron called 2K to 10K, which is an intimidating title. And I think I mentioned that on one of the previous episodes.
You did, and I read it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good book.
It's a fantastic book, but one of the things she really points out is when you sit down and you face the blinking cursor with a blank page, you have characters, world, language, and plot all to put in that same paragraph. And if you can piece those apart, and outlining is a great way to piece those apart. So outlining helps you know the plot in advance. It should, your preparation work for a novel, whether you're writing characters and settings, or magic systems if you're doing technology systems if you're doing sci-fi, when you write all those things beforehand, when you sit down to write, what you're actually looking at is writing the plot and the language, and piecing those apart helps you get more actually out on the day that you write.
Well, let me ask you this: when you talk about an outline, you know, as a trained English major writing papers in college,
yeah,
when you say the word outline, I picture, you know, 1A, subsection 1A. Are you talking about that, or are you talking about more paragraph style, just sort of a short summary of your story?
I am a Mac guy, and I use a Scrivener for my writing, which everyone should use Scrivener. I really am, whether you're Mac or PC, it's most powerful on the Mac. In fact, I switched from PC to Mac for 2 reasons. One, Microsoft got rid of my XP support, and I had an old XP machine, so I wasn't going to go to Windows 8, so I bought a Mac. And the other reason is for Scrivener. Scrivener also has another product called Scapple, and that's where I write. And it is basic, old, whiteboard-style idea bubbles with lines connecting them. The best part about doing that on the computer, that kind of brainstorming work, this is where I start. The best part about doing that on the computer is I can rearrange the bubbles. So it's not erasing a bubble like on a whiteboard or a piece of paper and then moving it or trying to change the relationships. If I want to just brainstorm and get stuff out on the computer with this program Scapple, and then I want to alter the relationships, I can do that. So I'll post some of that stuff on my website and actually get us a chance to look at it. But that's where I start. And so it's much more just the germ of the process is, one, knowing which novel I know that I want to write. So if I have the story idea and I know this is the story I'm going to try to pursue to a novel, the next step in the process is to write everything down that I know. And that's where Scapple really helps. And then I can organize it.
Scaffold is different than the corkboard part of Scrivener. Is that correct?
Yes, it's called Scapple. Scapple. So make sure that everyone hears that, Scapple, and it is a separate program. It ties in really well with Scrivener, okay. But I use Scapple first, and then I might go back more to the corkboard side of Scrivener to actually finish it up. But Scapple I have found to be particularly helpful when I'm at the chapter level too. So I might know what a scene or a chapter is about, and especially the further I get into a novel, the more I will have ideas about what I want this piece of the book to do. But I may not have everything filled in, and it may not be ready for me to just sit down and draft something. So I try to use Scapple at that point to put everything I know on the paper, and then after that, organize it, fill in the gaps, and hopefully from there I can get to a chapter summary where I can actually write.
I gotcha. Well, let's talk about this. When you do decide it's time to write,
yep.
Chapter 1, butt in chair, fingers on keyboard. Go.
Yeah, I try to set daily word limits, and my good days right now are about between 2,000 and 3,000 words, really about 2,000 words. I would like to see my days get up to being about 3,000 words a day. That's when I feel like I would be writing enough to feel like my career is actually gonna produce enough content to keep readers satisfied. When you're writing about 2,000 words a day, you're there. I mean, it's okay. That's good. But you have to be really consistent on that 5 to 6 days a week, 2,000 words a day, 5 to 6 days a week. And that can get tough. So I like to try to aim higher than that, which gives me, especially as a stay-at-home dad, some wiggle room when the kids get sick and I don't have a day, I can't write for a day. So that's why I aim a little higher.
I was going to ask you, are you one of those authors that wants to write 7 days a week, or do you want to give yourself weekends off? Or
yeah, I want weekends off.
It hits you.
Weekends off for me. And the reason for that is I find that I just get bogged down in trying to come up with the next creative idea, and time away, which is really hard for me. Time away is essential, though, in order to actually come up with the next creative idea that gets me out of corners. And I'm also a verbal brainstormer, so an essential component for me is having people where we trade brainstorming back and forth. So some of my time during the writing day will be spent here on Google Hangouts talking ideas with some of my buddies about how do I actually write myself out of this corner that I'm in.
So an ideal writer situation or writing situation for you would be a 5-day a week, 3,000 words a day. What's that? 15,000 words a week.
Right.
In a month, you're talking about what, a 60,000.
Yeah.
Right?
And if you're going to go the indie route, one of the very beautiful things about that route is that no one cares about spine size.
Right.
So novels have become inflated over the last 30 years, right? If you look at novels from the 60s, they really valued word economy and they valued incredibly precise editing. So you get wonderful books at 60,000 words. The marketing geniuses have figured out that we'll buy books with bigger spines. And so novels, to even get taken seriously, your novel now has to be 90 to 110,000 words. Before an agent will even look at it, at least in science fiction, where I'm writing. Oops, that's my fault. I'm going to have to remember that.
Mine is off.
Yours is off, and mine is not.
Well, that brings up an interesting question because, I read a lot of fiction, and I really don't like to read books that come with 3-inch spines. The one that comes to mind that really bogged me down was Stephen King's The Dome, Under the Dome. I remember just getting halfway through that and thinking, okay, it really should have ended by now.
See, what I think happens is that second acts get fluffed. They get expanded in order to deal with the need for a larger spine. And so you have a really tight first act that introduces the premise. You have this long, boring part in the middle, and then you have these great endings. So that's the last thing you remember. And you can take a lot of that fluff out. A lot of that stuff can just go.
I kind of understand publishers. The publisher point of view is, hey, if I'm going to charge you $18 or $29.99 for this novel, they probably think readers are going to go, hey, if I'm going to drop $20 on your book, I better get a book. With digital, you're right. You're not seeing the spine. You're not able to value or judge the book by its page count or its thickness. As a matter of fact, that's one of the questions I have for you. You know, I'm reading a Kindle book right now, and I was trying to look at it going, how many pages is this, or how many words is this? You can't, because the Kindle, you know, app or the Kindle, you know, sort of hides that from you. It gives you a percentage and a number, and I forget what the other number is, but it's like in the thousands. It's not a...
I learned to judge it by the percentage, right? How fast does that percentage move up?
Exactly. And so, you know, that doesn't bother me. When I buy a digital book, I'm not buying it because it's 300 pages or 500 pages. I'm buying it because I want to read it, or I know this author and I know he's got good stuff. So, but hey, let's get back on target here, because I got us off target, and I apologize. With your writing process, this is my question for you. When you finish a story, however many chapters it is, how many draft revisions do you, or how many edit reviews do you go through to get that book finished?
Not that many. Okay, so there is some editing process, but I think, especially once you get positive feedback. So you know, if you for one thing, I have beta readers that I read during it. So a lot of the editing process is done in the first draft. So, and that's a personal style thing. I am not someone who likes to throw a lot of words away. I feel like it's wasted time. So I have one reader that I trust the most. Thank you, Andy, and James is right behind him. So thank you, James. So I put it out to Andy and James as the book goes, and those readers take the first crack at it, and they give me feedback as I'm going. And the point of that is, I feel like if you let the compass needle drift, and you go 6 chapters down the road, there's a whole lot of work you have to do to get that back on track. So the sooner I can find out that this chapter didn't work for whatever reasons, the more closely I can keep that compass point where I want it to go.
I think you just answered a question. I'm gonna pose you a 2-part question. I'm gonna hit you with the first one, and then I'm gonna hit you with the second one and let you go. The first question I was gonna ask you was, are you one of those writers that sits down and basically just throws it all on the page, finishes the book, and then goes back and edits? Or my second part of the question was, do you edit as you go? And it sounds like you sort of answered that question. Your beta readers are helping you edit as you go.
Yes, I edit as I go. And so the actual editing process that I go through at the end, I will read it once because I want to go through and get everything out that I can see. And when I'm actually reading it at the end, I'm reading for continuity errors, and I'm trying to read for just language spots where I just don't like the language. But I'm usually not changing too much content. There will be a paragraph here that I have to add just because I realize, particularly in this last book, I'm jumping so much time. I mean, the book takes place over like 8 years. And so, the Far Bank of the Rubicon, I've got to make sure that I'm informing you of what's happened in the last 6 months, because you'll go from one chapter to another, and 6 months have passed.
Right.
And so you want to make sure that there's enough explanation of the last 6 months of events in that place. So that having been said, I'm definitely an edit as you go guy. And then the very last thing that is done after the book is done is I have my wife read it out loud. And that is definitely about language. So language for me is the last thing I worry about. I want to have plot, character, and setting down, and then I want to go through and make sure that I'm saying it in such a way that it's elegant and that you're interested in reading it. So
now let's I do want to come back. I think we're going to have to make this a multiple part discussion, because I also want to talk about what comes at the end of the book, which part of the writing process is getting it out of your hands and into Amazon's hands. But let's save that. Let's stick with the writing portion of the book. As you're writing your book, have you ever had that point where you got sort of 3/4 in or halfway in and you realize that your story has changed and you have to go back and fix things? Do you have that problem, or does your prevent that? You do have that problem.
Oh yeah, and that's okay. Like I will say that the main milepost markers usually stay the same. So like the real, like, I will know if you know the hero's journey, I will know the call to action, and I will know the abyss, and I will know the eventual what's called the gift from the goddess, the resolution, right? I will know those things, and those will stay the same. But everything between those markers will change. sometimes. And so, this winter I found myself re-outlining the third act of the Rubicon from the standpoint that I had a whole lot of characters that I didn't know were going to be in it, and I had to weave those in a way that actually made sense for the text. And so I found myself redoing the outlining. That's where Scapel became invaluable, because I could spend.
I'm gonna have to check Scapel out.
Yeah. It's $15 for the Mac, and it's just fantastic. So.
Well, you bring up an interesting question. Going back and sort of fixing problems, I think that's a typical. I've heard that a lot from a lot of writers, but at some point you have to. At some point you got to put your hands up and say, done. And how do you know? How do you, Eric, know this book is done?
That's why I use beta readers while I'm doing it. Because when my beta readers, who, that's my primary audience, I know that the type of reader that I'm trying to get are people like Andy and James. And when those two people say, yeah, that chapter's good, it's locked and done, and I'm not going to, I'll go back and do a language edit. And their job isn't to critique my language, right? My language can still be messy. They know that I'm going to do a sweep for that at the end. But when they say the content is great, then I stop.
So you're really hitting them up for the story, is that right?
Yep. I use, here's a whole nother podcast. If you haven't watched The Four Doors, The Four Doorways with Nancy Pearl, you need to watch her TED Talk on The Four Doorways. I think it's an essential tool for writers that they think about those 4 aspects of their writing. And I have my beta readers rate my book from 1 to 5, or rate what they've read from 1 to 5, a chapter usually, on character, setting, story, and language. And that rating system is designed to tell me, am I satisfied with language at 3? Yeah, on a first pass, yes, I'm very satisfied with language at a 3. But if language is a 2 or a 1, I know I've got problems. And then we start discussing, okay, what caused you to really feel like the language fell apart in this chapter? Or what caused you to not like the characters in this chapter? And that's where I start digging in to get everything to where I want it. And so for me, I'm happy with my language. I'm not going to write, much to Jonathan Liu's chagrin, I am not going to write a language-driven novel. And Jonathan is a great editor for me because he's a language-driven editor. He really likes good, chewy words. And I'm not driven by that. I'm much more driven by character and world building, and plot is actually third for me. So knowing that, I'm very comfortable with my language being serviceable or just above serviceable, as long as the plot and the characters are coming through. And that's where I choose to be satisfied.
Okay. Well, we have reached the end of our time, but let me do 2 reminders for our viewers real quick. You mentioned The Four Doors, and you also mentioned The Hero's Journey. We may have a lot of viewers who are not familiar with The Hero's Journey, so we want to remember to put some links up either in the video or on your website where we can point the readers to those. I've read them. I've watched them. They're really good. I also read the 2K to 10K book, and I'm a fast writer. I can crank out nonfiction. I can probably crank out between 3,000 and 4,000 words a day. Now it's nonfiction, and I'm writing all day. But that book really convinced me that I'm probably not writing fast enough. I found a lot of things that I'm doing wrong. So viewers, I'm not kidding. It's an inexpensive ebook that you can get. I got it after Eric mentioned it. I read it like a single sitting, and it's a really good book, Eric. I really appreciate you recommending it.
Yeah, I think it's only about 10,000 words at the most, and really what it is a series of essays linked together. So Rachel Aaron's 2K to 10K is a fantastic book. For writers.
Good motivational book. Well, let's do this. In the next episode, we didn't even scratch the surface of this writing process, but we can always come back. Yeah, I'd like to in the next discussion. I'd like to talk about when you put those hands up and the book is done. Let's talk about where you
comes next. Okay.
Well, listen, viewers, thank you for joining us. Again, we're keeping these short and sweet so that we don't go on and on for an hour at a time. But we do want to hear from you if you've got any questions for Eric or me. If you've got any questions that you'd like to pose about the writing process, indie publishing, the writing process, anything like that, just let us know. You can contact us via Eric's website, and we will see you in episode 4 of Novel Ideas. Thanks a lot, Eric. I'll see you next time.
See you next time.